All right, we're back with Waldorf and Statler. This time we're looking at the magic phase.
Section 10.
Section 10, right?
Yes.
Magic
Double
phase.
digits.
This is finally it doubles. This is probably one of the biggest phases that's changed in this game, from 9th to 8th, I think, or had the most changes, maybe.
I think it has the most detail changes.
Right.
I mean, basically works the same. It's all in the details.
Yeah. Start with the wizards. Wizard apprentices, level 1s and 2s, add +1 to casting and dispel. And wizard masters, which are level 3s and 4s, add +2.
And this is the first big change. Instead of 1 per level,
correct.
It's now max you get for your levels is a +2.
So now the only thing the level's giving you is the bonus spell, I guess.
Right, and that's basically all you're getting.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's,
And people will see when we get to the, looking at the spells compared to the previous editions, they all have slightly lower casting values,
right.
So they partially compensate, because they're usually down by 1.
Correct.
But it is, generally speaking, not as easy to cast a lot of spells. And it's impossible to get the uber casting values like you used to be able to. So the magic phase is a little more, I'll say a little more tactical. It's not all about 6 dicing anymore.
Right.
And you can't be as sure about getting things off. So.
Yeah, and as you'll see, the high dice throwing things hurt you more than what they did before.
And it's hard to get off lots of spells.
Right.
It's probably not a good idea to take, 2 level 4s and have 8 spells unless...
No, because
unless you really need them to complement your army to have a wide range of options.
Yeah, and the cost of those mages is higher than what it used to be, if I remember correctly, in most armies. So they give us a base description of spell, what a spell is, casting value, type. We'll go into the types in a little bit, but you can just... Every spell has a type, a casting value, spell name.
And a range.
Duration, range. Range? Anyway, maybe that's on down. Didn't see range.
It's in the description.
Okay, yeah. And effect. Spell effects are never affected by special rules. This stops your fireballs from gaining your killing blow.
Right.
They're just clarifying that doesn't happen.
Or poison.
Or poison, or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember one of our guys had the... wanted to re-roll his spells chances to wound because he was within 6 inches of his cauldron.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And then if you played EOS in the old days, the old Empire, you take the ring on one of your witch hunters, so you could...
killing blow your...
Yeah,
with your fireball.
With your fireball.
Boosted spells, just the ones with the higher casting value, right?
Right.
And then we come to spell types.
This is much more detailed than the old version.
But I think it kind of helps.
Oh, it definitely gives you clarity.
Right.
Especially when you have spells that do multiple things. And it also shortens the description on a lot of spells, because instead of talking about how it only affects the target models, you have rule like focus. And,
correct.
So...
Which take care of a lot of that.
So while there's more detail here, it does make it so the spells themselves are easier to read and consistent in their language, which wasn't always the case before.
Right.
Yeah. Especially amongst the more interesting spell lores of some of the Chaos and Skaven.
Right. Yeah. So augment only hits friendly units, or area effect. Do we need to go through these? What do you think?
I think the only thing you have to talk about is maybe some of the things that may be a little different. I mean, generally the same. Augment's kind of the same. It's your own guy is the aura. Is everything within a certain range.
Right.
So nothing's really new.
They split up. They used to be direct damage. Now it's split up into direct and damage.
Right. Yes. And the focus is in here now, so it's very clear it's against a specific model.
Which can be a single model picked out of a unit. Right.
And the difference between Hex and Augment is clear. Ground is kind of a new thing. Basically because it goes on a target point.
Right. I mean, there used to be ground spells, but they used to be different. Right. The old, Gaze of Mork.
Right.
and Burning Head. Both those were examples. Actually, those are kind of line templates
They're
as
more
well
line,
right now.
Yeah, so yeah. Even line spells is... Now, this is a point of clarification with the line spell. It's kind of like the cannon. It's all models that line underneath the line.
Right.
So it's not like, fire flanks or fronts or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Correct.
So you always want to shoot at an angle.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Go diagonal through the unit when possible with a line spell.
Vortexes are different to a degree. You have to see that in the spells. A lot of them don't have the big size temples like they used to.
Correct.
And then now, of course, they're all D6 based. There's no
artillery dice
ones anymore. So, and they all have the chance of going random on you. If you roll a 6, and without exception.
But they're just given a range, and the range is multiplied by your D6.
Right.
Unless you roll a 6, where it's centered over the guy.
And the final piece is once it's done, it's done. It doesn't sit there and block anymore like the old
ones did.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. Universal affects everybody.
Right.
It's like a hex and an augment, combined.
And spell duration, they kind of just... It's basically the same. It's just a little clearer, and they've laid it out a little bit. With the last one turn is... excuse me. Talks about if you... it clarifies if you, split off from a unit that has it, that, who actually has the effect of the spell.
Well, in this case, both keep it.
Right.
If you can't just...
You can't
send your character out of the unit to avoid the effects of the spell.
Exactly.
And it says, of course, a character comes and joins that unit, he's not affected by it.
Right.
So he doesn't gain it. So it's, anyway. Permanent, there's not a lot of permanent spells, but I think we talked about this when we were going over the spells.
Yeah, and
some of them are pretty significant.
And that's pretty significant. And they had them before, but they didn't have this definition, so that's helpful, so it's clear. Right. You don't have to read through the whole word to argue whether it's stays in play or not. Yeah,
I guess with the permanent thing, I guess you could have a case where you have something weird going on, where you have a character, like it uses an example. You use the -1 armor save to the entire unit.
Right.
Now a character joins that unit, he's not affected by it. They cast that spell again, now the character and the unit are affected. So you kind of,
Right.
I guess it can lead to that weird situation where you're tracking two things, but
it could, yes.
It's still remains in play.
It's basically the same, except about the dispelling it.
Correct.
Yeah.
The caster's slain. The effects end immediately.
Right.
As opposed to the permanent or the last one turn.
Right.
And that brings us to the magic phase sequence. You have the magic phase. You can see, start of the phase. You roll for flux and channeling. Remains in place, may be dispelled. Then you cast a spell, dispel, cast a spell, dispel, until you're done.
Right, and this is the important point we were just talking about, the remains in play.
Yes, this is your chance to dispel remains in play, not after you determine if the guy's...
Right, because it happens before the active player does his spell casting.
Correct.
So you may throw some dice at it, and he was going to stop it anyway. Right. So you got to take that chance.
Or you decide not to dispel it, and the active player just says, "Okay, well, fine, I'm just done."
Exactly.
Keep my keep my remains in play up. What do we got?
Magic flux, which is just different wording, and it's basically the same as it was before. You can't exceed 12.
Right.
And no more than 2 magic dice. Well, this is kind of new, actually. No more than 2 magic dice can be generated by each side on top of those generated by the magic flux in a single phase.
Okay. Well, they've kind of cut down on a lot on what generates dice, and
it's hard to boost your winds of magic. Well, sorry, magic flux, not winds of magic.
Yes.
In the past. But it's the same as before. You roll 2d6 and you get whatever the number is, and your opponent gets the higher of the other 2 dice, and you then have opportunity to channel, and this is a little different. You don't get extra dice for every person channeling. You get one attempt at channeling, and for every magic user you have, you add to that one chance. So the most you ever get is one die for channeling.
Right. Yeah, I kind of like that, because it stops the big, huge swings if somebody gets lucky and rolls 3 sixes.
And this can be, I know when we first started, and they rewrote it a couple times, but it got a little confusing to people, because it's 7 or higher and your first mage counts. So, to give you a 6.
And your first... What?
For the channeling attempt.
It's a 7 or higher.
Right.
Correct. And your first mage gives you the chance to get it on a 6.
Right.
Right.
So it's +1 for run. It's not.
Right.
You have to have a second mage. Remember?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There was that confusion.
We had that confusion.
It was written.
It was before this rewrite.
Right.
But yeah.
Starting with the dispel remains in play. Starting with the reactive player, each player can try to dispel remains in play. The caster can automatically dispel his own. Otherwise, you got to roll it, same as before.
Right.
The difference with this one is you have to do it here.
Right.
Because you see the next part where it says the guessing game.
And starting with the reactive player, not starting with the active player.
Correct.
It's clear. So yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Then we go into the sequence, which is pretty much as it was before. You decide you want to cast a spell, how many dice you're going to use to get it. One of the differences now is the max is 5 dice. It's no longer 6 like 8.
Correct.
So you don't have some of that Swedish ETC stuff where certain lures had different casting values to compensate.
Right. Most of them had got to the point where they were restricting it to 5 dice anyway.
That's true. But I saw some shadow.
But shadow usually was limited to 4.
Yeah, or at least certain spells were limited to
yes.
Different things. So, but 5, so back and there are some big uber spells in the game, but they're probably pretty much 50-50 casting attempts. Even with 5 dice.
Even with 5 dice.
So they're not the they ought to throw the dice at it. Even when you roll the we'll get to that, but even when you roll double 6s, it's not necessarily going to help you enough. So. You roll dice, and then you're successful if you're equal or greater than the casting value. If you don't make the casting value, you've lost focus, which is important, and the attempt is failed.
Right.
Then the reactive player can make a dispel attempt. Same thing. Pick how many dice you're going to use, and if the dice equal or greater than the casting value, then you've stopped the spell. Now this is another important one too, but if the spell fails and the spelling wizard suffers lost focus. I actually think this is something people forget a lot, even when they're playing. So
yeah, I agree.
You've got that high level guy, they lost it, and you don't get that. And what lost focus basically means is you can still do stuff, but you don't get whatever your plus is. So for that apprentice or for that master, or whatever they're called, the +1, +2 goes away, and that can make a difference.
Right. And this is the magical modifier, the limitation that's placed on them can not get more than +3 or fall below -3.
Right.
And this is just stop you from finding those holes
and stacking things on top of one another. Yes.
And there's where you talk about the lost focus, which you just spoke about. It's, once you've gotten to that point, you no longer get to add your spell level bonus or whatever
and not enough powers. Pretty much same as it was before. 1 or 2, the spells always fail.
Right. Overwhelming power. All right. Here we go. This is the double 6s.
Yes. Very different.
The double 6s, when you do it, it's considered overwhelming power. If you roll 2 or more 6s on this dice, you still add up all your dice. You get a bonus to the casting value equal to the number of dice you used
plus a
D3.
Right.
So this is where you're talking about you can cast that uber spell and still maybe not get it even though you roll double 6.
At best case, you're going to get a +8, which is a huge
best
number of casting dice is 5, and then D3.
You're going to get +8
if you roll 6. That's the best you can possibly get, which is a huge boost.
Right.
But I mean, in theory, it may not be enough.
Well, no, I think it is, because even if you roll 2 dice.
Well, I said in theory.
Oh, in theory.
It's not likely that you're going to roll 5 ones.
Correct.
But yeah.
Gotcha.
But then but that's the high side. I mean, it could just be 2 dice, or even if it's 5 dice and you get a 1, so
right.
6. It just depends. The big thing is it doesn't automatically mean that your spell is going to get cast like
Correct.
it used to be. And on the flip side, it still can be dispelled. Now, most of the time,
correct.
you probably want the guy to blow up his wizard, so you're not going to bother. But sometimes it's just too darn important. You can't.
Yeah.
Can't afford to go through.
And that's one of the new things is there's that extra thought process in there. It's like, oh, he miscast. I really don't want that going off, but I don't mind him having a miscast there. So
right, exactly.
Maybe I want to let it go through and deal with it.
And then he rolls a 7 and you're mad.
Yes. The miscast table has changed. Basically, if you see on the left under the miscast, it talks about the strength is equal to the number of dice used plus 2.
And it's fixed.
And it's armor piercing.
Cases. Yeah.
Correct. And then, the big one is 2 to 4. Now, if you're rolling, you're going to use the big template over you.
Right.
Everyone takes a hit. If you use 4 power dice, it's a 50-50 chance of your mage being gone. And the big change is if you rolled 5 power dice. If you rolled 5 power dice, get double 6s, and then roll this 2 to 4 on the miscast table, your mage is gone.
Well, I think the big change is if you roll 3 or less dice,
you have no chance. Correct.
There's nothing more frustrating to me in doing some simple little fireball or something, rolling 2 dice, and then rolling a 4 and losing my level 4 mage.
I'm going to miss that because you were good at doing that.
Yeah, I'm good at blowing up mages. But
that was always good.
Fortunately, in 9th Age, you don't have to have mages. So,
yes, that's a good point.
But I think, so basically, this is definitely a spell that you put a lot of dice at it, you're tempting yourself.
Correct.
You don't put a lot of dice at it, it still sucks, but it's not potentially game losing like losing your high level wizard could be in
Correct. 8th. And even on the other, most of the table is pretty close to what it was before.
Right.
The difference is the strength of the hits everyone's taking is based on the number of dice you're using.
Right.
And the number of hits are also fairly well defined.
And the loss of dice is consistent now.
And correct.
Yeah.
When you roll double 6s, however many dice you used, you also lose.
Right.
The amnesia is a little different. The one where you used to lose D3 levels.
Right.
Now you lose levels again based on your power dice.
Right.
And if you're using 1 or 2 power dice, you lose no levels.
Right, because it's casting dice -2.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this I think was a good change.
Yes.
I think these are really good change because again, being a Kingdom of Aquitaine Bretonnian player myself, nothing was more frustrating than rolling 2 dice
and then destroying your entire wedge.
and then almost no matter what you rolled on that chart,
it was bad.
It was 8 knights and your mage affected.
Yeah, no, it was just a terrible thing. I mean, it's still not fantastic for Aquitaine, but so
no, but at least now there's strength 2 hits.
Yeah,
if you use 2 dice.
If you're only using 4 dice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Magic dice use +2, so strength 4 hits.
Yeah.
Anyway, still nowhere near what it used to be.
No, not at all.
And then we get to the path attributes.
So the path attributes is pretty much the same as it was before. Every path has its own attribute. What's kind of different now is a lot of the units, we'll talk about this when we get into army books, but a lot of the units, when they have a bound spell, they also get the path, not in all cases, but they also get the path attribute.
Oh, okay.
So that's a change, which is kind of a neat thing. When you don't get it, like, tree singing, kind of you get annoyed, but it's only because you're not getting something additional that other people are getting. But in the end, it's something additional. But the bound spells mostly the same as they were before. Basically, you have a unit that has a spell ability, or you have a magic item, or you have whatever it has a spell ability.
Right.
You can they usually have relatively low values, and you can cast. From them. They don't lose focus.
They also don't gain the double 6s.
They also do not gain the overwhelming power, and they're easier to dispel. You get a +1 you're trying to dispel against them.
Correct.
And then the miscast result is a little different. If memory serves in 8th, if you miscast with a bound item, it burnt out, right?
Yes.
if it was a bound item,
If it was a
not
bound
if,
item,
not if it was a bound attribute.
not an innate
yeah.
spell.
Yeah, now it's consistent too, which is good, and it's basically how many dice you use is it impacts whether it's going to be used again. So some small things, you're not going to lose it.
Right, and there's that +1 you were talking about when you're trying to dispel a bound spell.
Right.
Which is good.
Yeah, no, I like that. It makes bound spells I think are better than they were in 8th in the case of, because things are harder to cast, so it's nice to have these lower casting things, but also they're easier to get past.
Right. Here they just kind of clarify what a magical move is, because there's several spells that give you a magical move, even lore attributes that give you magical moves. Just put it in the main rule book. This is what a magical move does. This is how you do it.
Which is almost all the magic section now is really about putting things in the main rule book, taking them out.
Right. Taking them out of the individual spells.
Recovering wounds and raising wounds. They clearly articulate the difference between the two.
Correct.
So sometimes there could be confusion before. It's like, can I add a new model, or can I just add a wound to that model? And that's clear. They do have the same, especially the undead used to have basically the order of things coming back. But they are very clear that captured standards cannot come back.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Summoned units, again, must be placed 1 inch away. Pretty much same thing, right? And also, same as before, they do not award victory points for summoned units.
Right. Yeah, I think, it's pretty much this section, but this phase, I think, while it's not substantially different from a mechanics perspective, all the little detail changes make it a very different phase. Correct. I think by nature it tends to be much more tactical. I think because of the casting values and how hard it is to get boosts, you're not going to... It's usually probably not a good idea to have a lot of mages out there, because you're not going to be able to get enough spells off to cover their costs. Right. And the high-level mages are not cheap.
Not cheap at all anymore. I mean, they never were, but...
And there is a bit of a reward, because the risk is so small, and spamming lots of simple spells,
Yeah, and the one thing I like you said, a little more tactical element to it, like you said, is you can kind of control your downside to miscasting. Right. Where before it was completely random.
And even in 8th, I tended to prefer lots of little spells. But the challenge there is then people, a good player is always going to know what you need to get off and what doesn't really matter that much. Right. So, if you're playing an old MSU, maybe, none of that mattered that much, but but it was usually better just to figure out what spell you want to throw all your dice at it, and take the risk. Yeah. Take maybe the Forbidden Rod if you're worried about blowing up.
Throw a couple spells and hope he gets distracted, and then hurl your dice at your big one.
And then you're fine. And then most average dice sizes, they don't do that. Like your opponent usually has 6, it's usually going to have less than 6 dice, and you're going to have more than that, so you can usually get your 6 out there, and and that'd be that. So I really like what they've done with the magic phase. Yeah, it was a big surprise because it was I wasn't expecting it. What was it, 991 or whatever version they put it in? It was kind of wow, where did this come from?
Yeah, they dropped the bonus, the bonus, the level
bonus,
right,
and all the spells, and because they also had the difference about it was easier to get more casting dice and all this other stuff. Correct. So they really went kind of the other way. And when we get to the magic items, you'll see that that they've also made it you can viably take a non-magic based list now.
Correct, which I like a lot.
I really like it. It's an option.
It is.
So you decide with what your strategy is going to be, what your synergies are going to be. It's not about I have to have a level 4 to survive, to just for no other reason to handle the dispels. Correct. That's no longer the case. You have many options to go with dispels, and you can take many approaches. I actually think it's better, frankly, not to take. I think they may have made the points a little too high for the wizard masters. I think most of the time you're better off with a level 2 wizards. Right. 2 level 2s. I think in a lot of cases is better than a level. Right. Level 3.
And if 4. You can, you're free to give a guy that +1 spell if you want to make sure you cover a lore.
Or the +1 to cast, which gives you the same.
+1 to cast is really good.
Which is like almost an auto take if you're going to do magic.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty much it for the magic phase.
Yeah, it is.
So that'll wrap that up, and we'll be back with more some other time. Right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right.